What's up, everybody? This is Whisky in the Six. I'm Rob. Doing the infamous White Walker by Johnnie Walker. Alright, so if you put this thing in the freezer, it glows blue like the eyes of the White Walkers from Game of Thrones. Diageo decided to release a whole bunch of Game of Thrones whiskeys. Most of them are single malts. 8 of them are single malts, and then this is the only blend. This is by Johnnie Walker. Of course, Johnnie Walker is owned by the conglomerate Diageo. I haven't tried this yet, and this is actually going to be my first impressions. Was I planning on opening this? I actually wasn't. I've heard a lot of things about it. I like the look of the bottle. Everybody knows that I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan, so I had to get the bottle, of course. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this video. So I'm going to nose it, taste it, give it a mark. And then after that, I'm going to talk to you guys about gimmicky whiskey. I'm not going to spend too much time with this because we know what it is. It comes in at around $60 at the LCBO, and literally that's probably because of the look of the bottle. From what I've been told, this is probably a lower grade than the Johnnie Walker Red, although it is bottled at 41.7%, so it's a little bit higher in ABV than the standard 40%. On the nose, there's a bit of a harsh element to it. You don't get any peat. You get some metallic notes. But that subsides a little bit, and then you get a little bit of apple, indicating that there's some young whiskey in here for sure. So again, on the palate, you're getting young whiskey. There's like a hint that's reminiscent of Johnnie Walker. There's a lot of apple. It's young for sure. We're talking 3 to 5 years old. I wouldn't say any more than that. At the LCBO, it's $60. I purchased this bottle for around $45, $50 in Alberta. And this was before it was released at the LCBO. So is it worth buying? I was going to actually keep one sealed, and I might still have to do that because I think there is some collectibility to these whiskeys. Is it worth drinking? In a cocktail, probably. Is it a sipper? Not really. You can get cheaper Canadian whiskeys like Crown Royal, for example, which is another Diageo product that will do just as good for a lot less than this White Walker. The type of person looking to buy this bottle is a fan of Game of Thrones. We all know that. This is where I'm going to get into the gimmicky whiskey topic because I had a bunch of people text me asking if I can get them this bottle before it got to the LCBO that don't really like whiskey to begin with, which is pretty much what Johnnie Walker intended for the release of this bottle. If they wanted it to be a high quality whiskey, they would have used one of their higher grades. They weren't intending to do that. They wanted to put the emphasis on the bottle, which they clearly did. A very, very cool looking bottle in my opinion. But the liquid inside is not great. It's definitely a cocktail type mixing style whiskey. Kind of has a cool story behind it. Maybe something that you would serve to friends on ice just to kind of break into some sort of Game of Thrones conversation. But not the type of whiskey that you want to impress your friends with, that's for sure. A lot of these companies are coming out with whiskeys that they can advertise, either backed by someone very famous or backed by a show that's very famous to help pump sales. Is there something wrong with that? I don't think so. We are all fans of the gimmick. I myself looked at this bottle and said I had to have it. It looks cool on my shelf. We are still victims of judging books by their cover. So would I buy another bottle of this? I would probably have another bottle of this to stash somewhere in the future, kind of tell a story to my kids. Maybe one day it'll be worth something. It's a limited edition. Another example of this was the big craze around the Proper 12 because Conor McGregor was behind it. Also, apparently not a very good whiskey. Not the type of whiskey I would seek out and buy to drink. But because of the backing, a lot of UFC fans went out and bought it, had this huge craze. Same with this White Walker, okay? A lot of Game of Thrones fans bought it just because they like Game of Thrones. They don't even like whiskey. They probably will never drink that bottle, but it looks cool. Collector pieces are a separate category in and of itself, so gimmicky whiskey should be treated like that. This is not going to be treated as a drinking whiskey. This is going to be treated as a collecting whiskey that people can have conversation with their friends about because they're fans of whatever it's represent. My recommendation to you is, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, which those who've watched this show for some time know that I truly am. I have a segment coming up in April when the last season of Game of Thrones starts, called Whisky After the Thrones. I've done one Whisky After the Thrones where I had a bunch of guests come in and we talked Game of Thrones after the season finale. I believe that was season 6. So you guys can look in the archives to find that video. But starting in April, when season 8 starts, every episode I'm going to be going live for Whisky After the Thrones, and I'm going to be talking Game of Thrones with a glass of whiskey in my hand. So I hope a bunch of you guys come to join and check that out, especially if you're Game of Thrones fans, and that's why you're watching this video, because we will be talking a lot of Game of Thrones on my Whisky After the Thrones in April when the season starts. I believe there's only 6 episodes, so what's going to happen is when I get the single malts of Diageo for the Game of Thrones series, I will do a whiskey rundown. If you don't know what that is, check out my last video where I did a whiskey rundown of the 2018 Bruichladdich collection. I'll be doing the whiskey rundown of all 8 bottles, and then on my lives, Whisky After the Thrones, I'll be grading and marking one at a time. So House Stark, the Dalwhinnie, I'll be doing the Targaryen, I'll be doing the Lannister, and all the other ones, the Oberyn, which is the Night's Watch. Alright, whichever ones I can get my hands on, basically, being that I live in Ontario and we don't have access to everything. I'm not even going to give this one a grade because I don't think you're buying this to drink it. If you're buying it to collect it, it is a really cool looking bottle. I don't blame you. I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. Actually, sitting beside the camera right now is the new book by George R.R. Martin called Fire and Blood, which I intend to read before the season starts, although it has nothing to do with what's going on now in the story because it goes back in time to the Targaryen story. I'm geeking out a little bit, so I'm going to end it there. Thumbs up if you like this video. You guys can click the subscribe button if you haven't already, and you guys can also check me out on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and leave a comment below. Cheers.